All right. Well, uh, welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Christopher Tull. I'm the project manager for the California Data Collaborative. And I'm going to go through real quick and just a little bit of logistics, and then I'll talk about today's presentation and hand it over. So logistics-wise, the presentation is being recorded. So if you need to hop off, or if you want to share this with your colleagues, keep an eye out in your email for the recording after this effect. If you have questions, please feel free to use the Q&A, and we'll address those at the end. If you are new to these webinars, just some quick background on who the CADC is, and why we're putting on a webinar like this. So we are a nonprofit membership-driven organization where water agencies collaborate to build community and technology that helps to reduce uncertainty and enable confident decisions. Our goal is really a water sector that's inspired and empowered to make informed, data-driven decisions. And webinars like this one are an important piece of that. And beyond that, we've had a lot of interest from many of our stakeholders recently to get more into content that's sort of educational and really helps folks within districts to skill up and prepare for really with the knowledge that they need to sort of tackle and take on data projects or software projects. And so I view today's webinar as really a piece of that. And I'm super excited for today. Our speaker here is David Lynch, and David is the co-founder and CEO of Klir, a software built specifically for water to reduce the pain of administration and data management. David is an expert in regulation and compliance, having worked with water utilities and regulators in Europe and the US for over 15 years. He specializes in defining policy and building software for water users. And I'm really excited because today David is going to be talking about, I view this as sort of helping folks who, for a long time here at the Collaborative, we've been talking about data and how data is being used, different approaches to bring software to streamline sort of operations and decision making. But some folks may not really know where to start. So David is going to be laying out a playbook today for folks looking to really start on this, sort of a digital transformation journey. So I'll stop talking there and hand it over to David.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you to the group to have us here today to share some of our learnings from our work in the sector. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share my screen now. And for anyone, I'm sorry if you were disappointed that it's not a famous film director talking to you today about water. It's just regular old me. So I think that you should be able to see my screen now, which is just, I suppose, the topic of why we're here today, which is to talk about, exactly as Chris said, how to write your utilities digital playbook. And I think what you will notice throughout this today is probably a healthy dose of pragmatism. And I think that's probably from the length of experience in the sector that we have, and that there is a role that pragmatism plays. So just again, in terms of logistics, there's a Q&A function at the bottom of Zoom. If you want to just ask questions, please feel free to fire them in. And I'll try and capture them we'll have a chat at the end, or if anything pops up during it, I'm happy to also stop. But with that, I will jump into the presentation. So I would start off by saying, and I think this comes back from my over decade experience working with regulators and water utilities and water authorities all around the world, hearing about this utility of the future. What is going to happen in 20 or 30 or 40 years from now? I think for a long time, a lot of it was just that, it was talk. But I think in the last decade or so, we can actually start seeing some of this innovation taking hold. And there is a lot of exciting innovation happening in water today. But I think with that in mind, we can accept that it's not just a fantasy. And if we look at this example here, which is one of Singapore's new water facility, this is actually taking place. We can see it today that there are the water utilities of the future presenting and being formed today. But what I like to reflect on is the reality that many of us face as water professionals in the day-to-day job we're doing. And many of our desks look more like this, full of paper, or we might have a lot of Excel sheets that we're managing. We're still dealing with challenges around obviously leaky pipes and different rules coming in, as well as a retiring workforce that we are worried about this knowledge that's about to walk out the door. So although it's great and it's healthy to have this aspiring view of what this fantastic Jetson-like water utility of the future will look like, I think for a lot of us in our day-to-day work, it is a big jump from there, from here where we are today to that point. And as I reflect on this, I ask, there must be some middle ground between the utility of tomorrow and the reality that we are facing today. And that is exactly the purpose of this session today. How do we make incremental gains and have that in mind, that we do want to progress and move to this utility of the future, but that there are things that we can do today in order to achieve that. With that in mind, I have come from my experience to believe that every utility needs a digital playbook. So in my experience, what I found is very often strategies are developed where it is like, we are going to do this 5 or 10 year IT implementation where every single thing we do is going to be run on this brand new system from a IBM or another massive system implementation. And these tend to take extremely long times to deliver. And over the time of that delivery period, needs change. And the sector changes in terms of different regulations come along, but also how we operate changes as well. So what tends to happen is those projects don't always result in a great deal of success. And based on that experience, I've been involved in these projects, and I have been that soldier where there's a hope that this brand new warehouse or this brand new thing will solve all of the problems we have, and it just doesn't materialize, and it doesn't pan out like that. So with that in mind, what we have found is that there are a couple of hallmarks for how to adapt to a new digital way of doing things. And in order to achieve that, it is not about another 5 or 10 year IT implementation, but it's more about a digital playbook. What is the framework that we can all operate in, that we don't have to have all the answers here today, but that we can all still work towards a common goal. So in order to get started with your digital playbook, what we would talk about is look forward to 5 or 10 years and what you want your utility to be. And I think a really, really good objective in that frame of mind is to just reduce the amount of silo or independent data. And I think that would be an incredible success. So what we have found is it can be as simple as starting an Excel sheet. Take a look at what is going on in your utility today. What are the IT systems? What are the processes that are in place today to manage the work that needs to be done and to manage the data that is being generated? I say processes as well as IT systems, because what we have found is that this entire sector basically runs as well as it does just purely on the passion and the grit and determination of very experienced, very specialized professionals. And what has happened in the absence of this integrated strategy or a better way of doing things or a home to go to ask these questions, they have these users or professionals have created processes or fancy or macro-driven Excels or exceptional filing systems where they know everything that needs to be done in their particular area of focus. So a really good start is to have a very simple audit of all those systems that are out there. I can attest. I've done this in a good few utilities, and it's not just yours. I would say when I say this next statement, because I think there's a fear that everyone is thinks, oh my God, if anyone could see how we're doing this, I'd be really worried or shocked. But I can tell you in my experience that many utilities, many teams have had to just make do and manage with creating systems themselves in this approach of Excel and Access. So there's nothing to be worried or cause for concern. This is pretty much how the entire sector works, around the world. So what we have seen is, if you go into utilities of any size, if you're managing 50,000, 20,000, all the way up to 5-10 million, is that there can be hundreds of separate IT systems that have just accumulated over the previous 5 or 10 years. So even just creating a simple sheet, an Excel sheet of how do people work. This doesn't need to be where we bring in lots of consultants. This can be just a case of, as I said, writing them in a sheet. When you look at that, then accepting that we cannot do everything at once. We are going to have to pick off some of the processes and systems and how we manage data across organization that are worth pursuing. And we'll talk a little bit about how to prioritize over the course of the webinar. But it's also accepting that some things can be good enough for now. Rome was not built in a day. And then I would say one of the final steps in this getting started is, make sure there's alignment, across what your objectives are in your organization. So again, this is, we have that experience of big tech investments that fail. And by creating this audit, as well as the focus areas that we are prioritizing, you're getting buy-in from the rest of your users and the rest of your organizations of what are we working on right now. And by doing that, what you will notice is that teams from different areas who don't know what other work is going on in other respective teams will start to collaborate. They will say, oh, actually, this is maybe how we manage something in cross connection, maybe with the environmental regulation team or things like that. So by even having this discussion, you actually get immediate benefits straight away. And also by creating this approach that you're saying, we have captured everything that we have here in this central Excel sheet. People feel that they are being engaged. People feel that they are being listened to. And when you come back and say, we're going to actually prioritize this, and this is the methodology we've come for prioritization, people will accept that, okay, listen, I have been listened to. I know my area or my focus area isn't getting fixed now, but it will also avoid them going or perpetuating the problem by going on solo runs and buying IT systems outside the framework or the playbook or the strategy that you've established. And being realistic, again, I speak from my experience, that is where the major challenges lie. When we do create these patchworks of less than perfect tech systems that we have to try and integrate, it creates holes in our cyber defense, but it also creates very different definitions of success and what the data should be doing. So now that you have maybe this simplified Excel, you have a view that everyone has been listened to, and you have this acceptance that we are going to prioritize. How do we actually set these priorities? And I like to come back to, why are we all here in the first place? The whole purpose of our being is to provide safe and secure water services. And I think, that's really, really important that we keep that central. I talk a lot of times, to people who are rolling out, asset management programs or rolling out telemetry implementation projects. They are a means to an end. The reason we are here is as stewards of our community. We protect our community day in, day out to make sure that they get safe and secure water services and to make sure that we prosper economically as a community. So in order to provide that overlying corporate objective, you can look to areas which are of particular importance to you. Maybe it's a case that we know there are leaky buckets, no puns intended, to capture revenue. Maybe there's areas around the cross connection or industrial pretreatment, or permitting or fines or whatever it may be. We do want to capture and make sure that we're not losing revenue as we get and move into a more revenue constrained environment. Increasing operational efficiency is always, a critical aspect of how we do our job better. And it is only going to get more and more critical as as the decades wear on. But this isn't the only thing that we need to. It needs to be reviewed and prioritized under the basis of the wider holistic goal. And by increasing operational efficiency, there can be ancillary benefits such as building internal, I suppose, internal momentum behind projects, because you can, particularly if you're having a challenge funding innovation, if you pick out areas that have increasing your operational efficiency, then you can actually use those as internal case studies to promote more innovation in your organization. But also, delivering exceptional customer service. We are hearing this, more and more, that this is obviously critical to our ability to provide that safe and secure water service, but also to correctly capture to capture the revenue. So when you have that priority set and you're saying, okay, we now have a framework for establishing our priority, we need to accept that we cannot solve all these problems. Again, I'll hit this point home. We cannot solve all these problems in one day. So you would now at this juncture have your audit, and you've also created a mechanism for people to contribute and input to how we prioritize. So again, you're re-emphasizing and helping with the change management, that people feel involved in that prioritization mechanism, saying, yes, I do agree that we need to capture more revenue, or yes, I do agree that this is the priority in terms of our ability to provide that safe and secure service. So with that in mind, you will then be able to achieve incremental innovation. So this isn't about, I think what's important is to manage both sides of the spectrum. It's not about a fancier Excel, because what you will do is you will lose momentum and engagement from your team. But it's more about creating value to achieve your goal. And you're not doing this by huge projects. So what's in the middle there? What is a step up from a fancier Excel, but also not a massive implementation? And we have to accept and understand that as an industry, we are accustomed to lengthy RFPs and large scale implementations, but that we can challenge that. And I think we can challenge that by these internal case studies. And you can actually adopt, there's a lot of room for innovation if we do adopt these cloud-based digital solutions, because it means that it reduces the risk of something going wrong, because we can operate in a sandbox and we can do it for much lower cost. And again, it can build that momentum behind your internal case study. So I think promoting the biting off bite-sized chunks, or taking off bite-sized chunks, and looking to cloud solutions to make this better and demonstrating the operational efficiency internally will allow you to build that momentum within your organization. And with that in mind, it's important to look at the stages then of what is this digital transformation. So again, this is sort of another way of looking at the phases or how you get to this utility of the future. And what I like to think about is we have been drowning for many years in this sea of data. I think at a particular period, it was like, let's just get as much data as we possibly can into our organization. The more telemetry, the more data, the more information we collect, the better. That was very much the objective, particularly at around 2000 onwards. What we have now realized is that there's a cost related to data, and the objectives we're trying to achieve are often misaligned or potentially misaligned with the data that we are collecting on a day-to-day basis. So the fact that we are collecting the most amount of telemetric data about temperature doesn't actually move this dial of our ability to create safe and secure or provide safe and secure water services. And the other aspect of it is that the AI and all these fancy new things that are coming out, machine learning, they're all really, really good, but they're only as good as the data that comes into a system. And it is that thing of whatever you put in, you get out. So we need to get this data right first and foremost. So I like to compartmentalize and segment to say all this, the smart utility of the future, let's put that to the side for the moment. And let's think more about how do we get the information that's important and the data that's important to us systemized. And that solid foundation will then allow you to play with, really, really innovative technologies in the future. So when you think about these different stages, we start off at the bottom in terms of the data of this DIKW pyramid. This is a leftover from my consulting days, so I apologize in advance, but it is definitely the best way that I have seen this represented when it comes to creating your digital playbook. So accepting that this data is the building block, it doesn't actually have any value without without layering on the information and knowledge and wisdom on top of it. So this isn't about collecting more and more data. So when you're thinking about areas of improvement for utility, it's not about let's generate more data. It has more cost. And also, as we move more towards, we are public servants, and we are moving more towards an approach with data, which is saying, not what is the data that I can put publicly out to my consumers as a default when we look internally, but what is the data I actually need to remove from all of everything we have and to not put out. So that shift of what stays in versus what stays out, we need to, we have a responsibility to make sure that we're putting out good solid data, and it's not just vast reams of it. So in order to, when you've achieved this audit, and by saying, here's the data we're capturing, let's try and taper down and remove some of the data we're collecting because it's not providing any value, and making that available, then you are enabled to start looking to the information portion of this, about the who, what, when, where, and we can derive information from that data that we have. So when we talk about the information knowledge section of this, we can actually we can achieve a lot in these two middle sections of the pyramid very, very quickly. So by whittling down the data we have and sort of asking the relevant questions of that data, then we can actually start deriving knowledge from this and saying, okay, this is helping me achieve my goal to ... And with that, then we get to this utopia of wisdom when it comes to managing our utility. So it's important to know that this is the end objective of, we are trying to provide safe and secure water services. I need this level of knowledge to do that, and I attain that knowledge with this information, and I get that data. So you don't just start at the bottom of this and look at data in isolation. You flow up and down it, and basically this is iterative, and you get more and more wisdom as you undertake that process. So you start by understanding your objectives, and then applying that to how your remediation efforts when it comes to the data portion. So in terms of getting started and moving on and trying to work at this pyramid and trying to get your data in a better state, the big challenge that I've come across, and what our users and what users that I've come across in my last 10 years are saying is, this is all great, but how do I actually solve the procurement problem? How do I get this new novel cloud software, this new information in, or this new product in to try and achieve these objectives? We under the framing of procurement. What I would say is that, don't wait to innovate. We're not going to solve procurement tomorrow. It is a huge area of opportunity for improvement in our sector. But also, I often say that, this is not going away. We are running a 24-hour production service where we cannot, drop in new technology on a whim at any moment in what is a critical piece of service we're providing. So this is never going to go away. It is a critical aspect. Procurement is a critical aspect of buying software and implementing new processes within a water utility. But there are ways that we can work within the frameworks of it. So don't wait. I would suggest, to pick off this bite-sized chunk and run a pilot. Pilots are case and proven the best way to work within the frameworks of procurement, but also drive value for your organization. So just take a small bit of functionality, try it, see if you get the value that they're doing. And also you get to date the vendor, make sure that they are delivering on what they said they were going to do. I would very much, again, focus on the, keep in mind the objective you're trying to achieve as opposed to the functionality. This is not about more data warehousing projects. Users are sick of them and they fatigue about them. You are trying to do that, but you're giving them value by organizing their data. So again, it's in terms of the spectrum, we're not doing a massive data warehousing project. let's just tidy up this little bit here. Let's just like consolidate 5 or 10 Excel sheets that we have in this particular functional area. And what you're doing is giving them a framework to operate in. You have a higher tolerance for failure. You are putting a smaller investment in, and you are saying that it is okay that this doesn't work out. It is okay, and it actually is a success if it, to say that this doesn't work out, because too often when we're doing big projects, it's very difficult to put your hand up and say this isn't working when a large volume of money, of taxpayers' money, has been committed to a particular project. And what you're also doing is facilitating change management in your team. Most, if not all, of projects fail because of the change management aspect. IT projects particularly fail when it comes to the change management portion of rolling out IT software. It's not that they don't do the functionality. So by taking this pilot-based approach, you are allowing users, and particularly if there's users that are reluctant to change, a very, very small bite-sized chunk to test it and see if it actually works. And then you're winning them over, and then they're becoming internal advocates. They're also sharing their data, when in particular, or we often see that users are reluctant to share their data across teams because they want to sanitize it or make sure it's all really tidy before anyone else looks at it. But by testing this and by just taking off a bite-sized chunk, they can see, oh, actually, sharing some of my data actually did it, everything didn't come crumbling down. So when you're thinking about running a pilot, I would say my learnings from this and the experience I want to share with you is when it comes down to when you're selecting a vendor. So I have found, and I've run like many RFPs and procurement processes and projects on both sides of the table, and this is a case of where everyone will actually benefit from this. So the first thing you should think about is, when you're picking a vendor, make sure that they understand the problem you're trying to solve. So when you're looking at a vendor, don't look to them to say, have you got this best in class feature or piece of functionality and I want the button to click this way or whatever. They are not aligned on the same objective as you are. You want to make sure that what they're trying to achieve is the same as what you're trying to achieve. A really good example of this is around, let's say, LIM software. A lot of LIM software providers come from the pharmaceutical sector. A lot of, let's say, EH&S software comes from maybe building management, or asset management comes from energy. They are not necessarily out there to make sure that you're delivering safe and secure water. They are out there to build a product that services many, many different sectors. So I would, when I'm selecting a vendor, I'd say, what are they trying to achieve here? Do they have an aligned mission to what I'm trying to achieve, or do they have an aligned approach to it? Because you have to be able to work together and face challenges. So it really is about the software achieving the objective as opposed to delivering on a feature. I again emphasize, make sure that it fits your utility needs. It's difficult to find out and understand this before you've done the internal trial. So this is something that I like to incorporate during the pilot phase. If there are concerns or questions about, oh, I don't know if this, if they're aligned to what we're trying to do and it's suited to our needs, incorporate that into your pilot to validate during the process. Because as much as what's important about a pilot is validating if the technology works, it's more about, when something goes wrong, what do these people do to get me over this problem? The perfect project is not about one with no problems. It's one that where problems are faced, that we overcome them together. So this is, again, I talk about the dating phase, making sure that they are people you can work with and address problems as they come up. And that really feeds into that partnership mindset. They are not just there to get in, deliver this and walk away. They are there to say, this is you'll find this with a lot with cloud providers. They are there to say, this is where we are now. But every day you use that product, it's the worst it's ever going to be, because it always gets better and better and better. And that is one of the major benefits of using cloud software, is it always iteratively gets better, and you actually get a seat at the table, particularly if you're early stage with them, or if you're have built that partnership mindset, to actually have a say in how that product is built. One of the, obviously, and this is probably, it comes across maybe quite obvious, is that this new tech should reduce the data silos. It sounds really obvious, but in many cases it doesn't. It just creates a new fancier silo. So this again feeds back into making sure you're not doing features and you're looking at the objective you're trying to achieve. So by looking at you're trying to attain this knowledge and wisdom, and you're going to implement technology to do that. That should, by its very nature, promote more cross collaboration, more collaborative work within your teams to achieve that objective and reduce those silos. And if you don't do that, then you are just getting a fancier silo which people cannot access. And what I finally say is make sure that you fold in users that you don't think would even have an impact in these areas that you've prioritized. It should promote this collaboration, and you should be able to test that at the end. Do people feel that they've derived benefit from this? So with that, I'm going to stop and open the floor up to questions. And hopefully you have found some of these initial learnings really useful. And I'm happy as always to have any further conversations, or if people want to get copies of the presentation, or even talk to some utilities I'm aware of that have found pilots really successful. We can do introductions to them, to share some learning. So we're really happy to be a facilitator with those that have been successful before.
Thank you, David. Yeah, so with that, I mean, everyone, please feel free to submit your questions in the QA, or I also see we have one here in the chat. While we're waiting for questions to come in, I would say I really loved your focus. You're talking your comment about all of the the different processes that just sort of need to keep a utility running, and the comment about how much of what happens in the sector is just sort of running on pure grit. I think that's very true.
And it's not fully appreciated. I'm always, every time I meet a user, I think this is so often never talked about. I talk about the poster where it's like the paramedic and the police officer and the fireman, and it's like, this is our local heroes. I'm like, what about the water operator? They do this every day, and they do it without a lot of support, and a lot of there's not great technology in the sector. It is purely just by grinding it out and making sure all this work gets done. That we are fortunate to get this water out of our faucets.
Yeah, I have certainly certainly seen that as well. I'm gonna go here to a sort of question / comment from Chris Sosnowski. I think he says that he thinks the fear of failure is historically too high in water, and that government could benefit from saying that it's okay for a pilot to fail. And it's important that they learn and not necessarily succeed. Do you agree?
100%. Like, I think this is, I know one utility, they actually measure, like they have an internal KPI that they only expect about 40% of pilots to succeed. And I think that's important to set that metric. This is not about, like who described it to me, when you're looking at baseball, it's not that, like, the hitting averages, it's your best in class is like the 300s, so that's 1 out of 3 is you're hitting the ball. You're not saying, having this expectation that 100% of the time the pitcher is going to hit the ball. So you have to set these, like, and baseball is a great example. Should it be a hitting average of 250 or 300, or what should it be? And the problem is, and like, I think this comes as an education to the public, because we have to be respectful that we are spending public money. So it is incumbent on us to educate. But we have to educate that it's good that some of these projects fail, because if they don't, then we're just buying everything we try. You don't want a utility that's, every time we get a product in, we're just buying it straight off after a pilot. You want some of them to not succeed. So I think a really good way of tackling this is setting that batting average that you want internally. But also, you have to get public buy-in, and you have to communicate. Because if you don't control the narrative of pilots that don't work, or money that's been spent, it will spiral, and you might lose public confidence. So I think getting out early and saying, this is what innovation looks like. We are not going to spend your money unless we are confident on it, and this is how we test it. We do these pilots, and we do this initiative. So having that information available, and putting that out there is a great help in it. So completely agree with that point. And I think in terms of fear of failure, it's also that the bar is set so high. If you're spending $2 million on a data warehousing project, or $100,000 or whatever, you can't accept that it's failing. Where if you're spending 20 or 30 or 50 or whatever the number is relative to the thing you're doing, saying we're trying this, but if it goes wrong, like, that's what we've lost in internal costs as opposed to millions of dollars.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's it seems like there might be other ways also to sort of reduce certainly a pilot is one way to reduce the risk of these projects. You start small, you see if it works, you see if you jive with the vendor, like you were describing. But I wonder if there are other ways to sort of de-risk some of these approaches. Certainly, I know that we've done some work developing sort of more custom software for agencies, and at that point, you can start with just designing sort of a high fidelity prototype, for example. And if it reaches the point where, okay, you have this prototype, it seems nice, but now you're starting to connect it to, okay, let's think about what this hypothetical piece of software would look like in our workflow. Is it really going to be worth it? Maybe not. Maybe you don't. Maybe you could sort of cut it there. So I think more broadly than just talking about pilots, thinking about other ways to just reduce the risk of these new systems without jumping into the deep end of the pool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like there are other ways except pilots. Absolutely, and trying out like iterative or smaller pieces is definitely a way to go. I think it's what, like, pilots are a bit of a common word, or a bit, or sort of a bit of a buzz about it now. But I think what it does, it creates this image in your mind of like, okay, there's entry and exit criteria of this, what will work and what won't work. So you can loan aspects or things that work from the concept of pilots, but the general idea is that you try certain aspects of it. Other areas to de-risk as well is around collaboration. You talked about that there might be some members that have this issues, like talking, are there other people who have this, or who's run a successful pilot in this area before? I think we by sharing knowledge, it's hard to do it, but that's why I always say I'm happy to connect people to people who ran pilots before successfully and share their learnings, because we could all afford to learn from each other in this.
Yeah, I think so. So all of what we've just been talking about tees up perfectly into one of our questions here, which is how would you actually get started with a pilot?
Yeah, so I suppose there's a couple of dimensions to this question. I suppose when you say actually get started, I wonder, is it a little bit because there's an internal reluctance to it, or is it actually the tactical aspect of it? So I might just talk a little bit about the tactical aspect of it. I would look, the first thing I would do is I'd look to organizations that manage and broker these pilots. So for example, I know WaterStart in Nevada, their whole business model is to help pilots and help even fund pilots for member water utilities. I know I'll do tag groups as well. So I think the first thing to do is, particularly if you're not familiar with pilots, is maybe look to organizations like that. And I know like WaterStart have members in LA and around California as well. So they would definitely have people in the locality that would be able to advise and talk about like the process of it. The great thing about organizations like that is there's a lot of stuff out of the box, like in terms of the contracts and the vetting of the technology and all those type of things. So if that's an option, I would definitely go that route. If it's a case of you just want to do something small, it could be maybe $5, $10, $15,000. I would look to, I think a really good area is to look to your budget for your year and see, where have you allocated, where is budget being allocated. So if you have, for example, a chunk of budget for consultancy to write certain levels of reports or something like that. I wonder, could you potentially earmark some of that out and sort of try and run a pilot to not use consulting for that exact same process? And so that I've seen that work quite well before, where you're still using it for the same objective. You're just trying to use it in a little bit more of a sustainable way. And particularly that works when it is on a much smaller scale, and much lower procurement thresholds that you don't have to go through too many hoops. So that would be a sort of a quicker way to get a little bit of budget to try it. And then in terms of getting, understanding the pilot or actually getting into it, you do need to involve procurement, even if it is below procurement thresholds. Get them involved. Find a partner in your procurement department who understands what you're trying to achieve, and they will help you and guide you through the process of setting you up with necessary contracts and necessary approaches to vendor management, particularly if you haven't done this before. And so I would always advise to involve procurement as early as possible. They are friends, not foes. And I will probably stop it there. If there's other questions or you want me to develop on that, I'm happy to add to it.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see, it looks like we have another question here from Chris Sosnowski. At what point do you feel water utilities need a consultant versus what should they evaluate themselves?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So in terms of when you need a consultant to evaluate, I probably think the simplest or the easiest way to do this is, by the volume of money you're spending. I suppose, again, if we come back to the concept of what you're trying to achieve, the objective, if your objective is to try and de-risk, you're doing a big spend and you want to make sure that you're not missing anything, or that there's technologies that you haven't come across before, it does make sense, and it makes financial sense to bring in a consultant. I don't think they're always the answer. Being honest, as having been that soldier, I think that they provide a level of security and level of comfort. But I think, what we have moved on from individual consultants who it can only have a certain purview, is to look to organizations to partner with, again, like the Isles and the Water Starts and different, and even yourselves, I'm sure, that have, are looking at this stuff all the time in terms of what's out there in the market. So I actually think you can get a long way by utilizing some of these groups and some of the people from the network here in advance of bringing in a consultant. And I would always try to, or encourage to question the cost benefit analysis of it, particularly if it's a smaller pilot. Like, I think if you're running to, if you spend $5,000 or $10,000 on a consultant to augment the technology, but you could just try one that you are 80% or 90% sure in your gut is going to work for 20,000, doesn't really make sense. That's why I look at the ratio of spend versus the consultant cost. But I think initially, no one knows this process, or no one knows if you're trying to achieve better than you. I think for too long in this industry, we've been told that the consultants outside know much better than we do and what's going on in our team. Every water supply zone and what's going on is different and it's nuanced. Many of the people we talk to have been looking at this for 20 years. There is no one better in this world that knows it better than they do. So I'm hesitant to understand, unless for very specific niche cases, what they're going to actually bring to us.
Yeah, great points. Definitely. And talking about sort of the value of tapping into that talent and sort of that drive that's present within at staff within agencies. We have another question here talking about suggestions for developing a mindset among staff who may be hesitant to innovate. The asker is saying this is a fairly risk-averse industry. The innovation mindset can be hard to cultivate.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I see this every day. So what I find works very well is the pilot. So I suppose initially we started talking a little bit about maybe the budget. Like, is there budget available to innovate? And if there isn't, then it definitely has to be starting on the smaller size chunks of innovation to build that internal momentum, particularly among senior management, that it pays to innovate. So that's sort of a separate piece. But what I would do, it comes back down to the vendor selection. So one of the things we do in Klir, what we often see is maybe a new group of people, or it's someone new to a particular role, wants to innovate technology, but there might be someone there who's been in a role for a long period and does not want new technology. So there's immediately at the offset there's this loggerheads of how we're going to trial this. What we say when we start off is, show me the most difficult process you want to look at, and show me the most difficult person, and that's how you test us, because you don't want a vendor that comes in saying, we're going to pick out the easiest thing and we're going to just deal with you, and it's going to all look fantastically fine and rosy or whatever. The only way this is going to work is by folding some of those people into the process. And if you find a vendor that is willing to do the hard yards with you, to work with them, to guide them through this process, to mentor them through it, and show that this, in almost all cases, this is not replacing jobs. This is just making jobs easier. I like to think of these things as like the caddies to the golfer. These software things are going to be carrying the bag for you and helping you hit the golf shot. They are not there to replace the golfer. And I think you can only feel that, and you can only appreciate that by actually doing. So I would, I always try to, and always suggest on our side, and I think, when asking of vendors, get that difficult process and get that difficult, objector or whatever it be into the process very early, and show that, build their confidence, because what that actually is going to do as well is get your momentum for the rest of the organization. Because if you know that there's maybe team members that are reluctant to innovation, but you have turned them with technology, you're actually just jumping 60 squares up the chutes and ladders board by getting you, like, oh my God, if such and such believes in cloud software now, then it must work. So it is if you involve them rather than circumnavigate them, it does actually help a lot.
Yeah, definitely. The point about me, yeah, it's people talk about, automation taking jobs, but at this point, I feel like every utility in the world probably has way more things they need to do and get done than they have staff and time to do it. So if you automate or partially automate something or make it easier and faster, that person's job isn't going away. They're just going to get to hopefully do something more interesting and less tedious with their time.
Absolutely, and I talk about the great example of this I talk about is there's a conference or a competition run every year in AI, and for a number of years they tried to, people from MIT and different universities from around the world would compete, and the challenge was, could you have computers detect cancer from radiological scans? And what they found was they get it to like about 92% efficiency, where they actually would detect, cancerous, tumors or whatever. When you compare that to a radiographer, they're around about 98%, where they will catch them 98 to 99% of the time. But if you put the two of them together, it gets to like 99.99999%, almost always a certainty. So, and I think that's exactly the same about water. I talked to one operator, one director of operations, who said, okay, you might have been pushing the button before for the last number of years, but now you're going to be, when should I push that button and how? And your computers and systems are never going to replace that. We're just going to be able to get better information to you to make those better decisions. And I think that's where, again, when you're looking at technology, what you should be thinking about is that, does this help me perform better at my job?
Yeah. So in this, topic, this building on this topic of there just being way more to do, obviously, and not enough funds to do everything. So we have a question here from Joe Maracinko, saying that there's a huge competition for funds between replacing aging infrastructure versus investing in future process efficiencies. And Joe believes that we need to have a too. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would completely agree with that statement. I think the question comes, of course, infrastructure is aging, and the very linear approach is, let's just replace it. But, it comes back to that pyramid of, like, should we replace it? Why should we replace it? Should we do it this way? Should we do it that way? And those questions can only be answered with you know, better knowledge, better wisdom, and that's driven by better systems. So, you know, I think it's difficult to culture this, to innovate, to foster this mindset internally. But I have lots of examples of, you know, I can give you, like, there's one particular one, I won't name utilities, but one project I worked on, there was an issue with NMP in a local waterway, and of course everything gets every pollution problem in rivers gets pointed at a pipe, which was always the way. So they put in a nutrient reduction plant at the cost of millions and millions and millions, only to find out that a fencing scheme subsequently, you know, blocking cattle access off to the stream, actually had, you know, much better desired impact than NMP. That's obviously a very extreme example, but what it shows you is that you know, this approach of building more stuff because we know how to do it doesn't actually have that end result of the outcome of making water better. So yes, there is a huge competition of funds between these two sectors, or between these two areas. I think, you know, again, it comes down to bite-sized chunks of innovation. You know, I think by outlining the case, and by, you know, talking to other, you know, we have asked ourselves of, you know, articulating how pilots work and the ROI and those type of things. You know, outlining to management, to saying, okay, I know we want to spend X amount of millions on infrastructure, but, you know, can we have 20, 30, $40,000 to this, and we will prove this is what we're looking to. And by and large, I have found that when you articulate your message or your question like that to management, and saying, we are looking for this amount and we are going to prove that this works by these success criteria, you actually do get good engagement from senior managers and allocation of funds, particularly when you can demonstrate an ROI. And I think if you can pick projects, again, through the prioritization, that it's like, here's immediate ROI, and, you know, people can get up and talk about the great successes project. You know, nothing directors, managers, and leadership love more than getting up and talking about successful projects. So by arming them with that, those assets, and those, you know, small pilots, you can actually achieve that. So absolutely, we need to have synergy, and I think competing for that one pot, by doing small pilots, you can have a really good internal case study to say it justifies the little bit of spend on this, and we can better inform how you spend money on infrastructure going forward.
Yeah, totally. And if you allow me to get just a little bit metaphorical here, you know, maybe you can view your some of your legacy processes as a form of agent infrastructure, right? I mean, if you have something that's sucking up a lot of time, it's really manual. You know, the more manual processes, you know, there's more chance for error potentially. It's, you know, you could have a failure there. It may not be quite as catastrophic as a line break, for example, but, you know, you could accidentally shut off someone who shouldn't have been shut off, or you could report, you know, data to a regulator that is incorrect and causes some undesirable effects down the line. So it's, you know, all of these things are important, and it's not really strictly just like a split between infrastructure, you know, physical things, and like software. It's really looking at this holistically and trying to figure out where we see the most risk. You know, where can we sort of invest a limited amount of funds to see the most reduction in our risk, and also the most benefit to our customers. And so
yeah, and it's only, you know, it's exactly I'll use your words about the process of aging infrastructure, but, you know, there are people, you know, approaching retirement, and I am not calling them aging infrastructure, just to be clear. You're saying it, Chris, right? But you know, like, I would ask the question of, through that grit and determination, people have been doing the process or managing this for however many years. They sort of know where the bodies are hidden, and they know how to make sure this thing doesn't fall over. A couple of years down the line, when they've left and it's a new team member looking after it, and goes wrong and it's a regulatory violation, or it's something that gets picked up in the press and your consumers lose confidence in you, that is, that can have very, very severe consequences on your ability to do rate increases or to, roll out new initiatives if you're trying to do turf stripping or anything like that. They are costly, and they cost millions of dollars to get these things wrong. So, I think your framing of it, that the processes are equally as, they are equally as infrastructure as the pipes that we service is a great way of looking at it.
Well, we have about 5 minutes left, and it looks like we have one question left. So I think we'll do that, get this one question, and then we'll wrap things up. So our last question here is, what are your thoughts about looking at total integration in single systems like SAP versus developing integration between individual, more specifically focused software systems using an integrator to tie the systems together?
Okay, like I suppose the short answer is they don't work. Like at a top end, I suppose this, okay, I'll start again. It's been framed as sort of an either or question. First of all, SAP and those things don't work. I have, that is mainly my career. I can't tell you how many times, I've been in sales meetings, and I'm not saying it's SAP, or it could be any one of the providers. And it's, you say, I wanted to do this, and I also wanted to send me to the moon on Tuesdays. Yep, we can do all of that. Don't you worry, it does all of those things. And there's a phrase we have, or the phrase from Ireland, it's a master of all trades, jack of all trades, master of none. And if it tries to be everything to everyone, it won't work. And you see this a lot, particularly at city levels, where they say, oh, you need permit software. Well, that's the same as park benches and how we do building permits, and how we, or assets for park benches, the same as assets for water, and permits for, police and for building is the same as water. It is not the same, so these big systems that say that they can do everything for everyone don't work. They never do. And I could have a line of users behind me telling you that, and the blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into trying to get them to work. On the other side, developing integration between individual focused software, I suppose, again, it comes down to sort of the groove or the middle of this. Going too far the other way and buying, more app type pieces of software that like manage one process and then they don't work for anyone else, that's not going to work either, because what happens is your team will become knowledgeable on it, but it'll become another data silo. And when you try to integrate it, it's extremely costly in terms of getting external consultants and building that middleware or that middle layer between these systems. It doesn't work. So, but what we're noticing in the field, or what we're noticing now in the sector, is there is this hybrid, or this middle ground of a little bit of SAP and a little bit of independent systems. And the reason for that in software is because up until 2010, 2013, 2015, features were an entire company. So an example of this is mapping. GIS and Esri, like mapping was just done by one company, right? It was just one thing. And then the other companies came along, and now what you're seeing is mapping is a feature of many, many different platforms that you have out there. So instead of a feature being an entire company, you can have features in particular products and in different systems. So nowadays, it is not a case that you need to buy one or the other. There are actually a lot of software solutions coming out today that are vertical specific. So saying we do all of this for water, and it's not just one very, very specific thing. They do a number of tools. And you see this again. Finance is another great example of if we look to a similar vertical, as well as energy is another example where they've started to make enterprise level systems, or products that are sort of in the middle between these two things. So I would actually avoid both of those things. I'd avoid the SAP, and I'd avoid going on solo runs with IT systems. I would look to ones that have even if they don't have it in place today, but they have a roadmap of like, here's how we could add more value to you in the future. I think that's what we should be looking at much more.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, David. We are now at time. So I'm going to wrap things up, but really appreciated your time today, and I really enjoyed
Thank
this
you.
conversation, and I hope our attendees did as well. I'll just wrap up here by giving a plug for the 6th annual California Water Data Summit. And I would encourage you, David, and your team to as well. Data Summit is an event that we've been putting on for the last 5 years, and we really bring from across California. We bring together water industry folks, folks in the tech sector, academia, and really just talk about different ways that data and software are being used to really meet some of to really improve the way that the water is delivered all across the sector. So and I'll stop talking and let folks get off to their meetings, but thanks again, and I hope to see you all soon.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.